It's the 25th of November. It's 8:39 in Beijing and 7:39 in Ohio. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
Cool. And welcome everyone else. Welcome to the MTT News of the Week. Last week it was the end of the world. This week it's not so dramatic, but we still do have a lot of stories to cover. So as we always talk about the Communist Party news of Communist Party around the world and workers' parties. We'll be doing that. But we also have, of course, the headlines, the main headlines. And this week, quite a lot to cover. Again, quite a busy week, not as dramatic as last week, not the end of the world. However, we've got a lot of legal news, a lot of legal stories out of the US. We've got 3 different cases, 3 things that happened or came to a head. Of course, Rittenhouse trial, then Ahmed Arbery trial, that also came to a head, as well as the Charlottesville. There was a case against the right wing, the fascists that had gathered in Charlottesville. Stuff obviously from the Indian farmers who've won against the state, once against the Indian government. We're going to talk about Ethiopia, and of course, then also there's been lots of protests in Austria, COVID protests, anti-lockdown measures all over Europe, but particularly Austria and Holland or the Netherlands. And then, of course, we still have a build-up on the Eastern Europe, in Eastern Europe, on the border of Belarus and Lithuania and Ukraine. We're going to cover that, as well as the migrant situation there. And some other things, some small bits and bobs about JP Morgan Chase and some other funny, interesting pieces of information that have come out. But and also one more thing, a strike that's going on against the African version of Walmart, Massmart in South Africa. So but so Jen, what would you like to talk about first? Any preferences?
I guess we can start with
You want to go with the geopolitics perhaps first?
Sure. Just because we can go from macro to micro, then proceed progressively. We will still see how they're all playing to the same kind of global picture of primarily people, labor versus finance, capital. I think that's pretty fair to say. With the Eastern European situation of the Union State of Russia and Belarus versus NATO. We are, to summarize everything up, we are seeing the exact same Cold War era war games being played out again. To the point where they are oftentimes the same units and the military units in the same vehicles.
Right.
And I suspect that many of the people who are currently serving in both red versus blue sides, their fathers actually served in these same units as well. So this is just extremely...
I imagine this. Although I imagine there's also sadly some changes, right? So I think some of the, just on a historical level, it's quite one of the changes you've seen obviously since the Cold War is that you'll now have, particularly with you'll have Polish units which still have T-72s, a Soviet tank, and then they'll roll around with NATO
side.
And also you've got there's NATO boots on the ground in the former Soviet Union, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. They have NATO boots on the ground. Those would have been former Soviet republics. So some changes, but like particularly with Russian units, you're seeing
they have revived their first Guards Army, and revived their for all the division titles within their first Guards Army, which is quite interesting. Quite an interesting move. Primarily, since it is the revival of all the Cold War era war games, the first thing to come is nuclear. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the United States has just rehearsed a nuclear strike, a simulated nuclear strike on Russia. Russia has sent out their nuclear-capable strategic bombers in Belarus. And the United States has also returned that in favor, in kind. In both the West, as in Europe, to Russia's west and Russia's east, which
Mhm.
will be Siberia and Alaska. So yeah, it is the same exact nuclear war game and then conventional war game of so German troops are very close to the western border of Poland. Russian troops are very close to the eastern border of Ukraine, so on and so forth. And with all that is the migrant situation with essentially the migrants being stuck in the middle.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
fact, I would say that like the migrant in between the border of Belarus and Poland is what triggered this.
sure. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's certainly playing a fundamental role. Is the migrant crisis. I just want to go. Yes, talking about these nuclear exercises.
Mhm.
Just to quote one of the defense ministry statements from Russia.
Yeah.
The defense minister underlined that during the U.S. military exercises, Global Thunder, 10 American strategic bombers rehearsed launching nuclear weapons against Russia from the western and eastern directions. Just thought that name was quite, Global Thunder.
It's always got to be something completely over the top for the Americans.
Yeah, I know. It's never something, defending. No, I don't know. It's always something dramatic, right?
Right.
Global Thunder.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Yeah.
That migrant element that you brought up there.
Yeah.
So of course, we've been talking about the ratcheting up for weeks now, and it's been, it's not necessarily a brand new development, but something that did pop up, which is quite interesting, is that we have these migrants who are coming from mostly the Middle East, countries like Iraq, Syria, and of course some of them also come from like Ethiopia, Eritrea, as well as Sudan. But many of them are from the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan to some extent. Now, they've been gathering, obviously, in Belarus, as we all know. However, it has been reported that Lithuania, which is where some of the migrants are going on their way to the promised land of the EU, they arrive, they arrive in Lithuania. However, there also have been Belarusians who are fleeing, apparently fleeing, the oppression of the government, of the Belarusian government. They are migrants nonetheless, for whatever reason, and they go into Lithuania. And when the Lithuanian authorities, meet them, capture them, get them, I don't know what word to use there, along with the Middle Eastern migrants, they're all put in the same camps initially. So Belarusians and Middle Eastern people. But after a point, pretty quickly on, the Belarusians get given asylum or some sort of process and become go onto that track of having a life in the EU, maybe in Lithuania, and the Middle Eastern guys or people get sent back. They don't get the same treatment. So a bit of a double standard. Let's just call it that. When the sense that,
put it lightly,
to put it lightly, and also, I mean, what is this, like migrant apartheid? It's a
migrant apartheid based on race and class, right?
Yeah, and there's also the geopolitical element. It's like, okay, we don't want Middle Eastern migrants from Iraq, the country that NATO blew up.
Exactly. Exactly.
We don't want them, even though the EU and NATO played a role into that. We caused it and played a massive role in destabilizing the entire region. We don't want to take those people, but we're happy to take Belarusians who might play a role for us in destabilizing and changing another regime on our border, and maybe we can get another EU.
With now, just remind me. Speaking of that, the EU, I believe, already does not recognize Lukashenko as the president of Belarus, and there's been some talks in the U.S. Congress about. In 2024, I believe, if Vladimir Putin, current president of Russia, runs for president again, they are not going to recognize him as the president of Russia if he were to win. That's that's called meddling with other nations' elections and internal affairs.
Yeah,
and the beginnings of regime change, color revolution. And that's why they need the Belarusian comparable bourgeoisie. So in our first episode, if anyone still recalls that, when we talk about the situation in Vietnam and the challenges that the Communist Party of Vietnam faced, is a lot of it comes from the comfortable bourgeois, petty bourgeois diaspora that fled Vietnam and went to the U.S., for example. So this would explain indeed why they are allowing in Belarusian immigrants and not the Middle Eastern immigrants, because also because if we were to look at it from a Marxist perspective, EU is experiencing crisis of overproduction. So they don't necessarily need more proletariat. In fact, they, I would suspect that they would in fact be tended to do some sort of Malthusian apartheid type policy against their proletariat of various racial ethnic backgrounds in order to continue this colonization system. So the last thing they want is to let a bunch of Middle Eastern working class or lower middle class people in, because these are firm Malthusianists who truly believe in like the whole overpopulation narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one last comment: if we add racism on top of that, that is just an extremely nasty combo.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's pretty. I don't know what it must be like to be in a refugee camp, and then you have people who you've been traveling with and you've crossed the border with, and all of a sudden, I don't know, two lines are formed. You guys over there, us over here. Okay, you guys going over there. You guys going back. I mean, obviously, it wouldn't happen.
Scary enough to be in migrant camp in the middle of the biggest military showdown, stand down.
Yeah.
In modern military history. That's the first thing. Second thing, there's been news coming out of the Belarusian state media, and also just the BBC's interview of President Lukashenko, that the Polish side has been doing some very, very disgusting and despicable things against the migrant settlements. Anything from flying helicopters very low so that the rotor wash, i.e. the wind that is pushed to the ground in order to, by the rotors in order to keep the helicopter up, is just like constantly blowing against migrants who are sleep deprived.
Right.
And also in the water cannons that the Polish side used, there is allegations, this is not confirmed, we cannot confirm it obviously, that there are some sort of virological or biological substance in the water, because right after that, massive amounts of migrants started to get sick.
Really?
Yeah, that part is actually confirmed. But as if it was actually something in the water, we don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's a pretty horrible situation for these people that have already fled countries that have been destroyed, and their lives have already been torn apart, to have to sort of endure stuff like this on the border. It's pretty horrible for them. I mean, coming back to the sort of the geopolitics of it, the bigger picture of it. I mean, this these nuclear exercises and whatnot, flying. Bear in mind that they fly these planes in the article you shared. I mean, they took about 20 kilometers away from the border. So
yes,
I assume it would be a bomber equipped with some sort of like nuclear cruise missile.
Missile, that's correct.
Yeah, so there's a cruise missile on board. I assume if it's a drill, if it's a proper drill, a proper exercise, you would have live weapons, on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about that, I mean, imagine if Russia flew a plane across the world and then was flying a nuclear bomber 20 kilometers across the border in Mexico, for example, from the US.
Well, they did push to the Alaskan border.
Okay, I see. They did the Alaskan border. Okay,
yeah.
Right. Okay, I suppose this has always been it's tit for tat, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, just on the geopolitics side again, this is only pushing Russia and China closer together.
Closer together, for sure.
Yeah.
And China has been playing a. Right now, we after this week, I think we can say with clarity and certainty that China is firmly supporting Russia, the Union State of Russia and Belarus in this effort. One is they signed a program, China and Russia, to even closer military integration and cooperation.
Yeah.
Secondly, so in simple words, the only reason that China and Russia is not a formal military alliance is because when formal military alliances get attacked, all members in the alliance have to go physically help. But given the vastness of Russia and where Europe is it really realistic, at all, for China to go send any kind of forces into any kind of combat forces into the Eastern Front of World War II? Who are we?
Yeah, it's a big, it's a massive distance.
And so China has been kind of through the One Belt One Road initiative, been stabilizing the Middle East through construction and building projects in order so that essentially to decrease the risk of CIA-backed terrorism operations and CIA-backed counter-revolution destabilization efforts, where they can go ahead and then continue to set up black sites, for example. So one of the signs out of that is China and the Afghanistan Afghanistani Taliban government is actually conducting trade.
You mentioned this. So there's pine nuts coming across. They're sending pine nuts back. The trade with pine nuts.
Right, exactly. So that's actually excellent news. It pushes the government and the nation and the economy of the nation in a direction where they can rely on a legitimate agricultural production to feed their people instead of growing poppy fields for the CIA.
Sure. This is good news. This is good news.
Yeah, that's right. And if you can turn essentially two things. One is from an ideological perspective. If you can turn the ideology of a government that used to be known for its terrorism and extremism into one of legitimate agricultural and industrial production and education and national development of infrastructure and hardware, then that's already a huge contribution to stabilize the region, more than what the U.S. was ever able to do ever since 2001. Secondly, there has been reports coming out of European NGOs that investigating Afghanistan that the United States and NATO forces, in fact, has destroyed up to 90% of the pre-existing agricultural land equipment, i.e. means of production, of the entire nation. So if the Afghanistanis, regardless of how we feel about their current political situation, if the people and just the whole country cannot restore production, then that's just a huge recipe for disaster, just pure starvation. So to encourage agricultural redevelopment or healing, essentially reconstruction, and the recovery of at least the agriculture of Afghanistan is, I believe, the number one priority in terms of stabilizing the region. Therefore, China is doing all these things in an attempt to bring about stability and just human development.
Sure. I think the piece I want to add to this is that it's a good development. I mean, it's a very good development that Afghan farmers are able to get some money, because the country is I mean, many reports of how terrible the economic situation is right now, because having just lost all of that Western money and Western government,
and winters
the whole and the whole sort of economic structure that was built around that, and a lot of it was relying on subsidization by whatever. So that's all collapsed. So there is many people saying that the country's on the verge of a giant
precisely
famine basically. So this is good stuff. I mean, what are they saying now? So 45 tons of pine nuts flew out from Kabul to Chinese markets.
And if I remember correctly, it was all sold out on Taobao, our version.
It was on Taobao
in like 1 day, under 24 hours.
That's good.
So
good. Yeah, I mean that's a small dosage. I mean, obviously they're saying that this trade link opened up in November 2018, but obviously it's been reopened now.
Right.
But yeah, 23,000 tons of pine nuts annually to China come from Afghanistan, which is pretty good. $800 million of revenue, which is good. That's something that these people need. But going on to the broader thing about this, exactly. So, Islamic fundamentalism. I think we should cover this sometime. There's, for example, an Islamic fundamentalist group, ISIS, spin-off in Mozambique, and there's not been like imperialist intervention recently in Mozambique. So. And so sort of the conditions, if you ask the question as to why has an Islamic state group formed in Mozambique, I know there's lots of things about the French gas companies and obviously inequality of the country, but also you have to remember that poverty is a big driver for Islamic fundamentalism. So if you want to think about how the Afghan people will themselves overthrow and get rid of the feudalist, backward Taliban ideology. They need to do it through development. They need to develop economically and have their own path to do it.
Right, because again, material foundation determines the superstructure. Right, you cannot have a hyper advanced superstructure that's ahead of the capabilities of the material foundation by too much, to the point where these two just completely becomes detached. So with this underdevelopment and just overexploited, sabotaged scenarios such as Mozambique, Afghanistan, so on and so forth, it's only natural for people to revert back to a feudal mindset of thinking, because they really their lives really have essentially returned to that era. So if you live in a state of being, then of course you're going to have a state of mind, right?
Yeah, the mode of production is defining the ideology.
Precisely. On the ISIS thing, I will just comment about this shortly. Essentially, there are a few factors that leads to these kind of in Western or in Interpol language, international fighters, international radical fighters, who purely travel from all over the world to join civil wars to fight for their ideology. The disastrous consequence of that is that they are terrorists, and these kind of purely ideologically based forces are harder to negotiate with. Essentially, any time you want to end a civil war, it's easy to convince all the local participants to come to a peace talk, because they see the damages to their home, their family. But when you have terrorists, literal terrorists from overseas, then it's almost like that's not their home. They're here for the ideological fight. They don't care about the damage to the locals.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is what you mentioned right there, Richard. The poverty. Essentially, we have to think that how bad does it have to get in the places where, say, ISIS recruit, in order for people to see death, a quick death in the near future in the battlefield as a preferable alternative to their lives.
Sure. Yeah.
And also we have to keep in mind that these places are suffocating under imperialism to the point where there is no outlet for any kind of improvement or what they perceive as justice, except going to war.
Right.
And it
Right.
is seen as like an acceptable thing among those people. And
Sure.
so, thirdly, I want to mention specifically with ISIS, they have their founder, I believe, have
Well,
this very nasty tendency that he essentially has built not just a manifesto
mm-hmm,
of the Islamic Caliphate and all that,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but a methodology and a philosophy, a way of life for these people.
Okay.
So when the Western world, there are a lot of fighters from your Western countries who got radicalized by ISIS propaganda videos,
Mm-hmm.
and then just like straight up left their lives and went there, right?
Yeah.
Who in the Western world, when we are taught that there is no one unifying truth, there is no one unifying philosophical explanation for the world, that and there is no hope or future. Everything is indeed just meaningless in the postmodern sense. Then
Mm-hmm.
even a very wacky philosophy and methodology to a worldview to interpret things and to in a way of life is indeed superior to nothing and just pure nihilism and postmodernism. And it leads to very, very tragic and disgusting outcomes, but nonetheless, in that moment, they were radicalized by it because the West has been preaching postmodernism and nihilism for the purpose of maintaining imperialism, and that's why.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's also
Yeah.
why that you can see chapters of it pop up all over the
Right.
Afro-Eurasian continent.
That's exactly why you'd see it. Yeah, exactly. In
Right,
places that
because
don't
of
even
that
have
system of thinking.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I think we should cover this in depth some time later, because it is
I
it
agree.
is quite interesting to talk about and look at the particularly the insurgency in Mozambique and Rwanda having sent troops in there, and some of the regional politics. But let's not get into it now. We haven't really got this. It's not really current news today, this week.
Yeah.
But still very interesting for future reference. I think one more thing we should cover in terms of the geopolitics in China, particularly, or two more things. One is that they've just had the ASEAN, the ASEAN, has met and had a meeting. Obviously, they've had their China special summit to commemorate the 30th anniversary of dialogue and relations. And yeah.
China has
pledged $1.5 billion to help
purchase
control and economic recovery, which is good stuff.
Yeah.
It's good to have this kind of regional partnership and dialogue between China and the rest. One thing I'll notice, though, is of course in the ASEAN, the image released by the South China Morning Post, it shows you all of the nations that make up ASEAN. So just for your interest's sake, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and a couple of other countries, obviously in the region, Vietnam. But Myanmar is there. However, their panel does not have a leader. The leader is not there. So obviously a bit of a I don't know, controversy around that. Obviously, with the situation going in.
Yeah. If we remember to last week, the Burmese People's Liberation Army and their struggle against the Myanmar junta, essentially, military dictatorship. Essentially, we are in an era where things are multifaceted. The overall struggle of national liberation and the people against imperialism does not change. But from that, we are now starting to have multiple combinations. Essentially, the Burmese Myanmar situation, for example. There is suspicion that the election, why the junta, why the military faction called the election fake and enacted a coup, was because of a Western color revolution. There's rumors on that. There's also rumors that the junta is also a part of the American kind of avenues of allies and subordinates. So then what do you actually make out of that situation, right? So the Burmese People Liberation Army though despite the lack of news, are indeed a people's kind of force of resistance. But then we are in a day and age where if a zone, not just a day and age, this if we remember to back to splendid isolation, the more you divide, the easier it is to be conquered and to be influenced. So then what essentially needs to happen is a peaceful, constructive, and original, as in it truly came from the local people.
Yeah, local.
Yeah,
Yes. Organic,
local,
yeah,
right?
natural,
Development
vegan.
to where these all these places are able to rise to a new level of consciousness, awareness, and constructive conflict resolution, to where they can become self-sufficient and self-reliant. And that's the whole philosophy of China's diplomacy, really. That's the philosophy of the Chinese doctrine to international affair.
Yeah.
I.e., you can be
Yeah.
anti-China, like so,
Sure.
for example, Duterte. You just can't be imperialist sponsored comprador. If you want to be anti-China, sure, but it has to be out of your
It has to be
sincere
your own,
expression
your
of
own,
your own
right. You don't need-
people's consciousness. Which you know,
I'm sure. I mean, obviously, someone might say that, what if a nation chooses to be an ally of imperialism, sort of. But I don't know. Let's not necessarily get into that right now. And also,
yeah.
I wish it was that simple, right? I wish
Right.
well, they just chose. Okay, well,
Oh
did
my
they really?
god.
Let's show me the example where someone just chose. Okay.
Yeah, and they're also just the enemy of the people. That's all it is. Of all
Yeah, I mean,
peoples.
yeah, sure, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think just on this, I mean, this wasn't necessarily the main topic of the ASEAN meeting.
Mhm.
It was about cooperation and collaboration, fighting COVID, and a big donation from China to help with vaccination and whatnot. And however, we've just had the 20-year end of the intervention in Afghanistan to try and make things better. It was a disaster. So any inklings of regime change interventions, whether it's a no-fly zone or whatever, we don't need to look very far in the past. 10 years ago, Libya, and as I said, Afghanistan, Iraq,
Absolutely.
Syria, these things are disasters. And we talk about a migrant crisis on the border of Eastern Europe. All of those migrants are from failed regime change. The majority of those migrants are from failed regime change.
And or trying to start current and upcoming regime changes.
Sure.
Right.
Sure, exactly. So let's not, I don't think, entertain the idea at all of someone else coming in and trying to solve Burmese contradictions themselves. However flawed the Burmese government might be.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, so just one more thing when we move away from sort of geopolitics and move a bit more to something else. The CEO, let me just correct this 1 second. JP Morgan's boss, basically, the big wig. Here we go. Jamie Dimon, I don't know. He is the JP Morgan's chief executive. JP Morgan Chase, sorry. He's had to walk back a comment. So he was at Boston College event on Tuesday, and he made a joke talking about the longevity of the multi-billion-dollar bank and comparing it with China's Communist Party, the Chinese ruling party. And he made a joke the other day that the Communist Party is celebrating its 100th year. So is JP Morgan. And he says, I'd make a bet that we last longer. And everyone, toasts their wine.
Well, that's the thing. Finance capital, they do last for a long time.
That's true.
And
I mean, it's not wrong. They certainly are.
So Panasonics, for example, existed even longer than
which one? Sorry,
Panasonics.
Okay.
Exists longer than China for sure, and many other younger nations. We have to look at it from a communist perspective, where finance capital's class interest does not change. And it stands in opposition to all peoples, right? So what do? Well, hypothetically, banks could change names But even when it's a different bank, it's just the same mechanism under
Sure.
new management. So do we really care? Are they called Chase or are they called, I don't know,
JP
Base?
Morgan Chase, or who cares?
No, we don't care.
Yeah. Well, I think it is quite funny though that
Mhm.
this quite bold statement, laughing, we can outlast them, haha, and then having to say, oh crap, sorry,
One more
sorry.
viewers
Oh, no.
commented on the Belarus situation. Yeah, Lukashenko has came out many times to talk about essentially how the Middle Eastern refugees are caused by NATO, as we were saying. So even from the perspective of just picking up after your own mess, which is already a very dehumanizing way of saying things, even with such a low bar of morality, the NATO still fails.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to bring that up.
No, sure.
Comment for sure.
No, definitely. Okay, so let's talk about. We've got quite a lot to cover. So one thing I'm going to just say in passing, and I apologize to anyone who's from Germany and listening to this. Obviously, we have a new era. Germany is now forming its new government, a post-Merkel government, and so it looks like obviously there was the German election a few weeks ago, and the results are out, but no one had a solid majority, so they have been in coalition meetings for weeks, and I still don't think they're quite finished yet, but we're coming there. So you can do a drum roll. So exciting. Olaf Scholz will most likely be the new chancellor. He's a social democrat, and he will be taking over from Angela Merkel. I mean, I don't really want to get into this. The politics of coalition building in a European state, EU state, it's just so boring. It's really boring. It's really boring. Yeah. It reeks of the EU kind of I don't know, corporatism and bureaucracy and corporatism and these alliances in a federal state inside the EU, and it's just all so wishy-washy, and it's just so bland, to be honest.
Yeah.
But if you have anything to say about that, go ahead.
Well, okay. A few things. One, for European parliamentary top politics, go watch Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. Those are excellent. I will always stand by that. They are wonderful shows. Now, furthermore, let's let this be an example. And I'm willing to put in at least some sort of bet here that Soc Dems will not bring about communism.
You said it here. You heard it for you're placing your bets. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it from here.
That's it. That's all.
Euro communists, listen. Okay. Okay. Well, there you go. But yeah, just so we can close this one. He has entered coalition. So Mr. Scholz, the most likely new chancellor of Germany, his partners are the Progressive Greens and the pro-business Free Democrats, and he is a social democrat himself. So there you go.
Sounds about right.
Center left, boring politics. Okay, let's move on to something else. In fact, let's have something entertaining. Since we're in Europe, you had a story about the Swedish prime minister, or we had the glass ceiling was almost broken again.
Yes, the first woman prime minister. So I think she was like the deputy prime minister, and as soon as her predecessor went away and she was appointed prime minister, she resigned in, I believe it was 4 hours.
4 hours
after Sweden had a first woman prime minister. Yeah, so Sweden was progressive and has achieved full liberation for 4 hours.
Okay, so women's liberation was achieved for 4 hours in Sweden.
Yes.
So the prime minister resigned, a man, and she took the job for 4 hours and then quit.
Yes.
And why did she quit?
We don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
We do not know. All the news that we can find in the world is just a short paragraph. That's it.
Okay, interesting. We'll have to. I think we'll have to come back to that. Let's make a note.
Sure.
Giving the first Swedish prime minister, female prime minister, her dues as to why she did it. So we'll cover that next week. Okay, great stuff. Then let's talk about. I mean, obviously, yes, we're in Ethiopia. Sorry, we're not in Ethiopia. We're in Europe still in terms of talking, in terms of our topics.
Spoiled the plot.
Yes, so well, I mentioned that at the beginning. Don't worry, they know it's coming. But Austria, there's been obviously a huge amount of protests, anti-lockdown protests across Europe. So, off the top of my head, I know Austria has been big, and the Netherlands has been big. Lots of protests.
Yeah.
And going on to our CP news, so Communist Party news. The CP of Austria has released a statement. So we're going to read that for you now. It's
the Party of Labor of Austria.
You're right. Sorry, the Party of Labor Austria.
Austria. We are both terrible.
No, sorry, we are really bad at this. 1 second. Yes, Party of Labor of Austria, and then this is their comment on the lockdown. So, in Austria, because of the rising or surge in cases, they have had a lockdown for the unvaccinated. And so now this is what the Party of Labor of Austria has said. I can't read the whole thing. Well, let's just see. So basically, they make 6 main points, and I'll just cover those. So on the 15th of November, the federal government imposed an Austria-wide lockdown for the unvaccinated. The Party of Labor of Austria cannot agree to this measure and wants to state the following points in this regard. Number 1, the effect of the lockdown for the unvaccinated on the incidence of infection will not be sufficient. Once again, the federal government has failed to prepare in time for an expected new wave of infections for electoral, PR, economic reasons, and partly apparently also out of sheer incompetence and irresponsibility. Now it is too late, as was the case with the past corona autumn-winter season. Once again, a lockdown, number 2, only applies to people's leisure time while workplaces are not affected. The population, or for the time being, only a part of it is supposed to stay at home in their free time, but dutifully go to work. The same people can work for hours in a workplace that they're not allowed to visit on their day off or after the end of their shift. This makes no sense and illustrates the hypocritical primacy of capitalist profiteering over the health of working people. Number 3, we believe it is fundamentally wrong to exclude unvaccinated people from social life who get tested. There will be hardly any benefit in curbing the incidence of infection. Instead, it is primarily a question of repressing the unvaccinated and putting them under pressure. On the one hand, we reject such a mandatory vaccination by the back door. On the other hand, it is a diversionary tactic. The government is looking for scapegoats for its completely failed pandemic policy. It wants to turn people against each other. Number 4, the lockdown for the unvaccinated is hardly controllable and thus unenforceable. The affected commercial, cultural, or recreational institutions have no more capacity to control these restrictions than the police do. Ironically, it is precisely this fact that makes it questionable whether this regulation can be upheld constitutionally at all. Number 5, the government has generated a false sense of security among vaccinated people in its propaganda, not least with the misleading notion of alleged full immunization. Vaccination is useful and highly likely to protect against a severe course of the disease, but much more than that. In this way, the government has made it possible for even vaccinated people to become carriers of the infection. This is by no means an argument against vaccination, but it does call for more caution. Obviously, it would have been necessary to test vaccinated people regularly too, instead of sending them into mass contact without hesitation. And the last point, number 6, likely there will have to be a complete lockdown even for the vaccinated part of the population. Neither the contact restrictions for the unvaccinated nor now hastily administered vaccinations will be able to break the 4th wave because it is too late for that. The fact that it has come to this is due to the failure of the federal government's pandemic policy. Some provincial governments are also very much to blame for the current situation. The Austrian caricature of federalism has proved dangerous. The population will again pay a high price for this. Okay, so quite a lot to cover there. I know that you've read this, Jin. So what are your thoughts on this?
This is very good dialectical take. Because in all Western capitalist or just capitalist liberal democracy governments of the world, there has never been a fully sincere, scientific, and comprehensive plan to deal with COVID. Never had. It's ever since day one. So what does that lead to? That leads to the fact that any measures that are imposed by these governments are not really truly for the purpose of defeating it. Lockdown, for example. A lockdown needs to be total, short, and sweet. as in China, Cuba, DVRK, so on and so forth. Even New Zealand was kind of okay, But so what we saw in early days of U.S. response to COVID. Yes, we are imposing a lockdown, but with the exceptions of you can go to literally anything you want.
Yeah.
It's literally impossible to break the rules of the lockdown. So then what does this become? This becomes, one, a farce, but two, we have to understand why it is a farce. It's very simple. COVID response, it just becomes an opportunity for corporations, particularly two kinds. Pharmaceutical corporation monopolies and supply chain monopolies such as Walmart and Amazon to override and just gain more power through rewriting the rules for emergency power in these capitalist states. So it's not done in the interest of the people. It's not done for the sincere purpose of stopping COVID. It's just expansion of power, of even more power, gaining even more power of the monopolists to be able to have in these imperialist governments. So that's then just brings in the question. When you preach correct things, such as vaccination, but if you do it in a completely insincere, unsafe, and illegitimate way, and also you're just doing and going half measures in terms of all sorts of policies to stop COVID. For example, they mentioned how a vaccination will protect your body, but it doesn't stop you from spreading, right? Stuff like that. Well, then what does this say? What is this saying? Well, it's just corporate fascism. That's what that is. So if we remember back to the theory of Carl Schmitt, the Nazi theorist, he says essentially what is power? Power is state of exception. It's when you're able to break rules in a democracy. You have to have a republic first. And then what is power? How the evolving to fascism? Well, you break down, you destroy the republic by democratic republic, and by breaking all its rules, but then being able to get away with it, and does not get any punishments. And you do that. That is power, and you do that through getting threatened by some sort of indescribable external threat that you have to unite the nation with. And if we remember Stalin's definition of fascism is unprincipled cross class unity in the name of the nation.
Yes. Yeah.
So literally, just unprincipledly going cooperating with the bourgeoisie, the comprador and the international bourgeoisie, really. So this is exactly what that is. So if we were truly being dialectical, then these European protests, especially if they are left wing and if they theoretically understand what they're doing and what's going on, are doing a pretty good job. It's very dialectical. It's very multifaceted and comprehensive. Right? We saw that in the statement itself. So that's pretty good.
I think it's. I think you've made some great comments on that. I'll just only echo sort of some of what they've said originally here, as well as some thoughts in general about the pandemic. I mean, this has been the trend from many social democratic, multi-party democracies, liberal democracies, is this inability to really have a proper policy. As you mentioned, Vietnam and China and Cuba and DPRK and some multi-party liberal democracies did manage. I mean, New Zealand did a pretty good job too, and a few others. But
hello
generally,
to our audience.
Yes. Hello, everyone who's watching. We've got a couple. So hello, Jennifer and Sudayalis. I don't know how to say that, but yeah, Suedalis, I don't know. But yeah, welcome, and hello again. Yeah, it's great to have some comments. But yeah, just on the point of being able to deal with this stuff. I mean, we had people denying it, and we don't want to go through the whole history of COVID reactions and policies, but yeah, it seems pretty clear. The massive contradiction. I do like this point they make about the fact that you're talking about someone who is not vaccinated must stay at home, but must still go to work. So they go to work, and spend 8 hours in their workplace. Let's say they work at a bar or an office, who knows?
Oh no!
And breathing the same air, exchanging with the people, being there. And then once they go home, they can't spend their leisure time in the exact same place, breathing the exact same air, making contact with pretty much the same people. So, I mean, just completely illogical, right? So this is some of the stuff, one of the trends of consistency amongst all of these things was, policy being illogical, sort of, and not being able to see reality.
Right. You want to kind of stop COVID, but you don't want people to stop sacrificing themselves to be a blood sacrifice for the machines of capitalism.
Yeah, sure.
So to make a reference, it would be like, yes, McDonald's workers can, I don't know if they have as cancerous as thing as McDonald's over there, but it would be like saying if you can work there, but you cannot buy any food in there, or you cannot use the restroom. You are only allowed to work.
Right.
It's right.
Yeah, it's almost, yeah. If you put it like that, it sounds really bad, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But let's finish on that one. Just a small story as we leave Europe. A very quick one, because we still have to cover a very big story, which is obviously all the Rittenhouse and Ahmaud Arbery and all of the legal stuff in the US. So let's just quickly touch on this one here. So the French flag was changed by the French government 5 years ago, and no one noticed. Now.
Because it was only
right now there's a giant baguette in the middle of the French flag, and none of us have noticed.
Of course.
No, there's a picture of a nuclear submarine, in fact, actually.
Yes.
But yeah.
So how it actually is left, right, left, center, and right of the flag is blue, white, and red, right? But the change is that the left 1/3 of the flag has went from a light shade of blue to a deeper shade of blue. That's it.
Crazy.
That's why people haven't figured
no
it out for 5 years. Because
for 5 years,
I assume if I were to be like looking at these flags every day and it indeed changed like that, I would just assume that I'm going crazy.
Well, I mean,
it would be like a conspiracy in the back of my mind.
Outside, I feel like the blue might change from the sunlight anyway. I mean, if I look at flags change color when they're up. It's sun does stuff to people and things. But anyway, just some fun. Let's talk about the Indian farmers. So this has been a nice story, a nice success, a win for workers, or for farmers in this case. This is in India. There's been a long-running dispute, farmers against, I believe, the local government or the Indian government, and the Politburo of the Communist Party of India, Marxist, salutes the historic victory of the year-long spirited, inspiring, and courageous struggle by the Kisans under the leadership of Samyukta Kisan Morcha, the Politburo, or the PM, against the PM and his government were forced to bend. So the farmers won. The Kisan, or what do they call them? Sorry, the Kisans. Yeah. Yet Modi continues to justify these black laws, blaming a section of farmers being misled. There is no remorse expressed at the deaths of our farmers or the attacks against them. The CPMI reiterates that the Parliament, while repealing these black laws, enact the legal right to sell at MSP for all agricultural crops. Just a quick one on this. More than 750 farmers died or were martyred in this struggle. They faced hostility from the BJP administration with military-type roadblocks, threats, intimidations, and murderous physical attacks. Strict action must be taken against all such people who have indulged in these activities. The Politburo of the CPIM hails the determination of our farmers and endorses the SKM's approach that they shall wait to see the materialization of these assurances before returning to their villages. But yeah, good piece of news that. I mean, I know that, I think it was a few months ago, some motorcade of some wealthy BJP government person. BJP is the ruling party in India, if you don't know. A Hindu nationalist outfit. Some people call them fascists or neo-fascists. We can discuss that at some point. Nonetheless, they drove their car into these farmers and killed some of them. So I think that conflict, that protest, that contradiction, that clash between the farmers and the government, I think that was a turning point. I think that the BJP had to submit because it was becoming too much.
Yeah, it has been very protracted and bloody. Given all the footage of violence that we've seen of the Indian government against the farmers, the people, and all the news we've heard, essentially, of the Indian Party, Indian Communist Party Marxists, in fact, had their office building destroyed, people beaten, and the statue of Lenin torn down.
Really?
They return in kind, torn down statues of like Hinduist statues in the Hindu nationalist territories as well. So like, given all of that, and given the footage of even like during COVID, how the Indian police was still like practicing essentially the same practice of
the British, beating with sticks.
Exactly.
Beating
people up with sticks and holding them down with just straight up chemicals. Without any kind of
there's some pretty backward stuff there.
I would suspect, in fact, that the number of deaths of the farmers is even a little bit higher. Given all the chaos, right?
Sure. There's probably, it's difficult to measure these things, right? But I mean, going off of what the CPIM has said, it's 850, which is, if you think about it as a labor struggle. I mean, if you think about like
there's a lot.
The 1985 and 1984, miners' strike in the UK. If 850 miners had been killed,
right?
I mean, there would be civil war essentially. I mean, that would be that's a huge number. The massacre of miners in Marikana in South Africa in 2013, there was only 12 dead, so 850, that's a huge number.
Insane, right?
Congratulations to the farmers. We haven't got time to sadly go through the details of what they've won, but they've obviously, from what I understand, they have the right to sell at a certain price or it to be bought at a certain price. There's more guarantees.
Essentially not have big capital monopolize and therefore exclusively being able to set up the price of how much their goods would be sold.
Right, that's it. So we wanted to cover two more things, but I think, to be honest, we can't really go into the Ethiopian situation today. We haven't got time for that. So we'll cover that, and it's still an ongoing story. It hasn't finished yet, so it hasn't reached its sort of peak. Perhaps, hopefully, it doesn't come to that. But one thing we will say about it is that for the first time now, we're starting to see the word civil war being used by lots of media organizations. For some time, people were just saying X force, Tigrayan forces, and Y force, government forces, are having clashes, and there's been an airstrike, and there's been shooting, and they've taken this territory, and all of this is happening within one country. The word civil war wasn't coming out yet. People weren't using it yet. And now,
when you have soldiers, armies shooting each other that's in the same country, it's not a civil war?
Right, exactly. Gosh. When the army is fighting a massive internal force that's contesting their control, their monopoly of violence in the territory, it's a civil war. And so now we're starting to see that word come out. We are seeing the starts of another wave or a current new Ethiopian civil war, which is not good at all for the people of Ethiopia. But we'll have to cover that in more detail next week as the story unfolds. So let's just go back to essays to the CP. Things, different news coming from different places. But we're going to South Africa, actually, to the SACP. They've released a statement expressing their unwavering solidarity with the Massmart group of workers led by a trade union called the SACCAWU, which stands for the South African Commercial, Catering and Allied Workers Union at, of course, the Massmart group. So they're on strike starting on the 19th of November, and they're demanding simple things. One, that the Massmart Group must stop unilateral restructuring and changes to their employment conditions. Two, that the Massmart Group must increase their wages so they can improve their living conditions and those of their dependents. And the workers have mandated that the union to mobilize for a consumer boycott of the Massmart Group stores starting on Monday of the 22nd of November. The SACP will be joining them. And of course, the stores are, the warehouses are Macro and Fruit Spot. So if you don't know Macro in South Africa, that's kind of like a, what's that giant warehouse you guys have in the States where you can buy anything?
Costco?
Yes, it's like
Okay.
Costco.
Gotcha.
It's like Costco. That's what that is. Mass Build, Builders Warehouse, Builders Express, Builders Trade Depot. So lots of stores, and then obviously other stores. So this is actually quite. These names will not be familiar to an international audience, but we're talking about these are the biggest retail stores. So Builders Warehouse, Macro. It's the equivalent of Costco, Home Depot, and stores like that all going on strike. The workers go on strike in those places, which, it's good. This is the kind of, politics that brings about change for working people. Strikes and demanding more from the capitalist class.
Right.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Good luck to them. Let's hope they win some concessions.
Yeah.
So let's go on to our final piece, which I was hoping we would have had more time for this, but we spent more time on other things. But
right.
Three big legal cases
in the United States.
Yeah. So just to remind you, the big one that everyone was talking about that was covering most of the news was the Rittenhouse case. But there's been two others that have just happened, I guess, in the last 48 hours or so. The other one being Ahmaud Arbery they've also
the murders of Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah, the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. His case is also ended. They've been found guilty. So the three men that chased him in their pickup truck with their guns because he was running on a jog in their neighborhood, and they decided to be, vigilantes. They've been found guilty. The other third case is Charlottesville. If you remember the Unite the Right rally in 2017, in a short summary, the organizers of that rally have had to pay $25 million US dollars in damages for organizing that rally. So good to take money out of those pockets, I guess, and put it somewhere else. But what are your thoughts on this one? Obviously, quite a big topic. Let's maybe want to talk about Rittenhouse first.
Sure. There is a few aspects we can get into. I'll try to go through them fairly quickly. The first aspect is coming from an international perspective. Just the simple insanity of allowing people running around with assault rifles and the kind of limits of what Americans define as self-defense. And not public risky behavior, so on and so forth, is quite crazy. And that's what led to the justification by the American court system that Kyle Rittenhouse is completely innocent. And in contrast to, say, the other two cases that we just mentioned with the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and the Charlottesville fascists. Essentially, I remember reading President Biden's tweet, which I don't think is tweeted by him, which is saying that, I am very angry with the Kyle Rittenhouse court decision. We still need to remember that it is the decision of the court, and we still need to respect the American legal system. Right. So what we are seeing is that the discussion around the very concept of justice is starting to take place in all of American society.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is a huge kind of topic where there's a few layers involved. One, what is law? Law is the expression of the will of the ruling class. The American ruling class is finance capital. So therefore, quite simply, even though it is legally mostly correct from what I've heard the case, Though I am definitely not a legal expert. It's just that, is it legitimate from a justice and morality perspective? Because understand that law is the lowest bar of minimum entry in terms of human morality and
Sure.
philosophy of
Yeah, it's
justice.
the last.
Last resort, right? So in this, like, if you take on the idea of like whatever the law does not stop you from doing is permitted, that's a very Western kind of conception, right? That's already a very, very messed up way of going about things. And so going into that, this case is obviously a result of that kind of mentality, which enraged, say, half the country. And so then there is the other danger, which is because law is the expression of the will of the ruling class, and the ruling class is going to package it up with philosophies of like morality and the world meaning of the world and so on and so forth. Then like the other extreme end of undialectical reaction would be that because current American laws are BS, are nonsense, morality and philosophy is just also nonsense. And then completely kind of going towards the extremely postmodern, relativist, nihilist end, becoming anarchist, thinking that nothing means anything, being super cynical towards everything. Anyone telling you that you should have a set of morality is just oppressive, so on and so forth. That's also extremely, extremely unsocialistic. That's not that's not productive for building socialism. It just simply isn't. So, and then last point on this, which is I think that the practical effects of these cases is that both parties are going to weaponize it during the upcoming election in the United States. And for the Democrats, just Biden's not going to win again. From his
Before actually, let's hold back on that one for a second, because that is a big question. Maybe we haven't got time for that one this week, but whether the Biden situation for the second term or not. But
they're going to use the rage and dissatisfaction of the masses and manipulate it to where people, maybe through media propaganda campaigns, people may forget about the incompetency of the Biden administration, Biden regime, really. And then the Trump, Republicans, MAGA, they're just gonna keep be doing MAGA things, So that's what I expect out of the situation. I would just like to warn people that feel like all the negative dissatisfaction for this all we want, all we need, but don't let the cortisol get too over your head to the point where you forget about the material things that led up to the situation and the material conditions of the current United States, and don't let it destroy your whole worldview. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into all of it right now. I'll pass some comments. Because there's a lot of details to it, right? I mean, on the details side of it, just briefly, I don't know if there's any other country in the world that the result would have been like this.
Right.
A boy taking an assault rifle, being able to have an assault rifle, being driven by his mother across to a different state to then take part in defending property or who knows what. I guess that was the initial thing.
That was the
claim. And then shooting people. And obviously, the one guy was charging him, and so he felt like he needed to defend himself. Okay, but then after that, he ran away, and then people tried to stop him. So in terms of one of the narratives of this is it was about who's the hero. What is justice? Right? So you've got a boy with a gun who goes to defend property. He sees himself as justice. I'm going to Just do what you
And then everyone going to the BLM rallies also see themselves as justice.
Well, that's it. That's
Right.
exactly the point, is that you've got the other people going there and protesting because they say, well, we're here because we're right, because we're fighting for justice for what's right. And then you've got the guy who rushes Rittenhouse because he sees him as whatever. I mean, I don't know exactly what he thought, but obviously thought he was fighting a bad man. So it was all, cops and robbers.
Yeah.
Like
Nobody.
And then also the guys that the
No
two guys
one
that
is hero.
in,
Absolutely
yeah.
not.
Well, and also once Rittenhouse has shot the first guy, he then runs away. So you have the other two guys who see a man with a gun running away from what they see now as a murder scene, or he's just shot someone. So they are now the heroes. Now they are the policeman. Now they are the cop, the goody. So they have chased him. So then he's defending himself. There's this. Those are the two narratives here: the cop and the robber, and the baddie and the goody, and who's the baddie and who's the goody. But at the end of the day, I mean, just on the
no one is a hero there.
Without getting into the ideology of the goody and the baddie and all the stuff. I mean, even in the British Army, a soldier does not get given a rifle to have with them all the time. Professional soldiers don't carry their rifles in camp with them all day. They take them out on patrol, and obviously there's different situations, but generally speaking, you put the rifle in the armory and you're not allowed to just have free access to it willy-nilly. Assault rifles, right? Yeah. So the reason is because they're dangerous, and if you are constantly carrying them and have access to them, things
it's a matter of time.
Exactly. You will drop it. Someone will bump into you.
Yeah.
You pick it up in a strange way. If you're carrying it all day, things will happen. And this is the policy of a professional army. And, people's weapons are discharged accidentally all the time with professional soldiers. So the idea that it should be a blanket policy that a 17-year-old or even 18-year-old or even 25-year-old, just anyone can have assault rifles willy-nilly. I mean, the militaries don't apply that policy. The militaries don't do this. So why on earth would you have assault rifles being given to people, ordinary people, to be able to carry around? And just on the final point that I'll make on this is that, if you're talking about the communist position on this, so we mentioned this before we started talking, is that, lots of American communists, if you want to call them that, leftists, I don't know what we call themselves anyway nowadays, will say, they'll quote that line from Marx, which says, any attempt to disarm the workers must be quashed. You must stand up against it. You must resist it. You must resist any attempt to disarm the workers. Is a counter-revolutionary. It's a terrible thing. But look at the policy of communist states themselves. So whether it's Vietnam, the former USSR, or China, or Cuba, I mean, I think the policy is generally, if they do have guns, it's in a gun club. So like you have some form of self-regulation. So it's held in an armory in a gun club. It's not like every person has, a PKM machine gun under their bed. I don't think that's the policy. That's not been the policy. It's crazy. So no one has this policy of arming the people in this way. You can still have militias, but you don't need to have 17-year-olds with AR-15s. It's
this kind of American white culture kind of being weaponized into stupidity. To then just perpetually. Okay, I will tell everyone who actually wins from this conflict.
Yeah.
Arms dealers and politicians. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, the NRA wins this one. Yeah, definitely.
Right. NRA wins this one because people, in order to, they feel like they're threatened, therefore they are going to buy guns to defend themselves. But then that increases the odds of some sort of repeat of this event at some sort of scene, especially with the deteriorating economic conditions and the completely just unrevolutionary and acritical lack of just completely illogical state of being of the American society right now, and all the kind of riots and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
The odds of the whole society just turning into a giant gunfight, that's like a very real threat. I mean, because like once you're in this kind of vicious cycle, the only conclusion is a cycle of increasing levels of violence. We know in America, for example, that there has been just an unbelievable amount of AT-4 rocket launchers being sold to the civilian market ever since the
So I mean,
United States moved onto the Javelin as its primary infantry anti-tank system.
yeah,
We've seen in, say, Portland, when the right-wing factions show up, that they and the absurdity of it is this: they get arrested by the FBI when they have AT-4 rocket launchers.
Well, wait, so what's your point? They get arrested by the FBI, so
like what I'm saying is that this is all just comedy. It's all just a farce. These people don't have the intent to kill, but they want to make them. They want to lie to themselves as if they have the intent to kill and fight.
Yeah.
Because like if it really was two army, one side had rifles and like multiple AT-4s, the other side just had like submachine guns. It's the side with the rockets that's gonna be winning, and it's probably gonna be hunting the other side down.
Yeah.
If everything was kind of equal, right? But like this is just clearly proof that this whole the ridiculousness of this whole situation. You aren't really in like it's just protesting and demonstrating and marching with guns. It's not war yet. It's just a bunch of babies in tactical airsoft gear. In the thousands on the street. And it's almost like at this point, it's almost like American gun culture and how it plays into this. It's like the modern equivalent of Japanese sword culture.
Sure.
Like this kind of unhealthy fascination. Yeah. That's all I can say on that.
To be honest, I think we're going to have to go into this topic a bit more next week.
Right.
And it definitely comes into, if we want to cover this, I don't know, it's not really news, it's more of a general, broader trend of the schism between, the left or the right, or the factions in the US. If there's a civil war really brewing, or a Yugoslav style split or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a good discussion to have. And we also have to bring that in the same time with Biden and whether he's going to have a second term. But so we're going to have to do that one next week because we've gone well over time here. So we'll finish with our last point, which is with Biden, of course, the administration on just what we just mentioned. The United States for 90 minutes last week
has achieved total liberation.
Yeah, women's liberation was achieved in the same light as Margaret Thatcher and Christine Lagarde and Marine Le Pen and Angela Merkel. America achieved women's liberation for 90 minutes because Biden went under and had a colonoscopy. So he was obviously under anesthetic for 90 minutes. And the nuclear codes and presidential executive power, all that kind of stuff was handed over to Kamala Harris for 90 minutes. So America had a black Indian female president for 90 minutes.
Yeah. Wow. And if anyone criticizes that America hasn't really changed, they are just a bigot.
Yeah, no, you're a bigot. This is very much. Anyway.
All right.
But, so we're going to finish on that one. We'll cover more next week. We're back at the same time next week. So thank you for our viewers who've joined us and made some comments tonight. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. And thank you very much, Jen. And have a great week, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.